think that's fine. Thanks, Willem. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for hanging around. I think I've got about 15 minutes before we... No, if you want... Is there anybody who needs to leave at 5:30? No? So if I go a little bit beyond 5:30, you're okay with that. Is that all right? Okay. 6 o'clock is also good. Okay, all right. That's fine then. No. Yeah. No, I'm very good at curing insomnia. So, well, it's wonderful to be here. And I mean, this is the second time, of course, in 6 months. And actually, of course, the way I made sure that I got invited back was to leave my tripod here. It's not quite true that I organise the conferences every month. Willem is trying to catch up with me because we had AV6. AV stands for Alternative View. So we had Alternative View 6 in the UK, and William came across to that in May. And then, of course, the month later, Willem organised his first Open Mind event. And then, because I've got AV7 for May next year, he decided he had to get at least 1 or 2 more in to try and catch up. So in a couple of years, he's going to be there, Open Mind 7, 8, whatever. And it's great, and I'm really impressed at the speed with which he got it organised as well. I mean, he called me, I think, about 4 weeks ago and said, would I be able to come over? And it's great. And as is always the case, for these events, although you've got an organiser, he can't do it without the support. And I probably don't even know all the players that have supported this, but I know of John, of course, and Gregg, and Runa, and Mehdi. And so, can I ask you to give and there's all the staff as well in the kitchen. So, these events take a lot of effort to put on, and somehow he's managed to do it on a donation basis. So, can you put your hands together for these people? Thanks. Okay, well, as is always the case, there's no collusion between the speakers. We know each other, we've met each other a few times, obviously, over the years, but there's no actual collusion. But it never fails to fascinate me how there is a common thread that runs through the presentations. And, I don't think today's going to be any different. And what I'm going to try and do in the next hour or so is pull some of these threads together. And I'm sure that I'm not really going to be sharing much that you don't already know. And sort of help to perhaps put the picture into a broader perspective. But at the same time, what I want to try and do is introduce you to some concepts. And Willem has already started to introduce them in his opening remarks. But how we can actually bring about the change. Because I would have to observe that the rate at which people are starting to realize that something isn't quite right is increasing exponentially. But the establishment don't care how many of us know what's going on if all we're doing with it is writing to each other on Facebook or sharing videos. They don't care, because as long as we're not actually getting in their way, as long as we're not actually doing anything to prevent them from pursuing their agenda, then they really don't mind. And as Ole alluded to, it's very clear that these guys are doing this to those people who know what's going on. I mean, the classic was the London bombings, which of course was 10 years ago this year, in July 7th, 7/7 of 2005. And on the side of the bus was an advert for a film that had just been released. The film was called The Descent, which was a horror movie in the genre of Blair Witch Project. But the wording on the side of the bus was outright terror, bold and brilliant. I mean, you just Google, you just go into any search engine and put in, 7/7 London bus, and you'll see this for yourself. And the whole thing, of course, as Ole explained, was totally staged. But this is the establishment doing this to the community that knows what's going on. And they're like, well, we know there's some of you out there who know what we're doing. Might be a few thousand, a few tens of thousands, a few 100,000, maybe even a few million. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because we can do this shit with absolute abandon. Because there's not enough of you to actually change the direction in which we're going. But 10 years on, I think they're getting worried. I think that they are starting to get very concerned. And what I'm going to share with you as we go through is some of the evidence of that concern, some of the acceleration of the agenda, because I think it was Willem who showed earlier that Zbigniew Brzezinski said that, basically we need to get a move on because the biggest obstacle to establishing the one world government is the rapid political awakening of the masses. Well, actually, a few weeks later, he gave another presentation, and in that presentation, he actually said the biggest obstacles, plural, to the establishment of the one world government is the political and spiritual awakening of the masses. And I think that's very, very telling. So the title of my presentation is Total Lockdown, the Perfect Storm. And I think it's also important that we start changing terminology. Has anybody ever heard the term ruling elite? Yeah? Well, it's wrong. What the fuck are we doing using this terminology for? It's the ruling parasites. They are the parasites riding on the backs of humanity. And just like the fleas needed the host of the dog or the cat, these parasites need humanity. Just not in the numbers that happen to inhabit the face of the earth right now. And obviously they're trying to do something about that. And they're also trying to do something about this rapid political awakening and this rapid spiritual awakening, which they don't really understand because they don't have these capacities. That's why they are desperate to try and establish an agenda to shut it down before it gets to the point where it's out of their control. And this is where the transhumanism element comes in. So this global control grid, it's being drip-fed to us all the time. The total control. This is from the Daily Mail. This is a couple of years ago now, I think. Yeah, 19th of June. So this is a mainstream paper in the UK. We'll be uploading our entire minds to computers by 2045, and our bodies will be replaced by machines within 90 years. Google expert claims, and as Desiree alluded, this is Ray Kurzweil, who's determined to establish or to become immortal. Personally, I can't think of anything more disgusting. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm ready to go home any time. All right? I know my contract's not up yet, so I've got to do what I contracted to do. But, as soon as I finish that contract, I'm ready to get out of here. And, Ken O'Keefe, who spoke at the last event, I was actually having a conversation with Ken in his kitchen a few months ago, and Ken, Ken's very passionate. And Ken was in a real sort of passionate mode, and he's like, you know what? When I'm done here, that's it. When I cross back over, I'm going to tell them that I want to go to a place where I can just rest and relax and play some golf. And I said, you think that's the case, Ken? I said, actually, what's going to happen is when you cross back over, the guys are going to say, yes, Ken, you think Earth was bad. For your next assignment, Earth was just the training ground. God forbid. Now, of course, I have no idea. I mean, this is all random philosophy. But the reality is, keep an open mind. And also, we have to avoid having any existential attachment to a particular outcome. What we do see, of course, is that right now we're on a trajectory that actually doesn't bear thinking about in terms of the legacy that we are potentially going to leave for future generations. Because if this trajectory does continue, then basically we're going to be in a situation of effectively downloading of the mind, whatever that might mean. and you know, basically, once they've got your mind, they no longer need the physical vehicle, so it's enforced euthanasia. Now, I don't know about the Netherlands, but in the UK, we effectively have a national program of euthanasia right now. With evacuation on them. I mean, who's going to get on a bus that says evacuation? You know? Forgive me, but I mean, this sort of gives me memories, recollections of what I've read about the ghettos of Warsaw and the like. You know, the buses come along, evacuation. You know, you'd have to be crazy. I think if I saw a bus coming along and said evacuation, I'd be, you know, looking to go in the other direction. But yeah, we've got the euthanasia program in the UK basically is trying to get rid of the useless eaters. If you are not making a direct contribution to the corporatocracy, what's your point? You know, it's a useless life. It's a drain on society. And if you aren't physically well enough to contribute to the corporatocracy, then we'll put you into one of the establishments that we have the misnomer called hospital, but actually it's a death camp. You know, it shouldn't surprise anybody in the UK that if a doctor's involved in an accident, they'll go, don't take me to hospital. Don't take me to hospital. I don't want to go to hospital. I want to go home. Because they know damn well that your life expectancy is greatly enhanced if you go home versus going to the hospital. And we have a euphemism in the UK, and this is actually the official term. It's called a care pathway. A care pathway. Basically, that's the accelerated doorway to the care. It's a euphemism for, you know, we're just going to make it easy for you. We're going to pump you full of morphine, and then once you're full enough of morphine, we're going to turn off the life support. Because you're not making any direct contribution to the corporatocracy, so there's no purpose, no benefit in you being here. You know, history repeating itself, I think. And yet, because we have guys in the UK who present their agenda in dark suits with a tie, I've never been able to understand why it is that people put a noose around their neck every morning. I did a quick check to make sure there's nobody wearing a tie when I did that. Unless you are in part of the slave labour force, if you have any capacity and capability for independent thought, then you're a potential threat. Now, Ole introduced himself as a terrorist. I would like you to know that I am not a terrorist. I'm not even apparently regarded as a terrorist. I am classified as a domestic extremist. But David Cameron went across to the UN a year ago, and in a speech at the UN, he made the observation, and in that he said that domestic extremists should be treated in the same way as ISIS. Incoming! Well, of course, except that ISIS are being nurtured, as we're going to see, by the UK, the US, and... Sorry? I need to get a Toyota, yeah, exactly. You know what? I have been all over Amazon and eBay. I have been trying to find the website where you can order those Toyotas and the rocket-propelled grenade launchers. I can't find them. Apparently you have to be in the Middle East to be able to order them. And then they have these special deliveries. I mean, I know Amazon are talking about using drones, but apparently in the Middle East they have special deliveries using the, the big jets, and they come down on a parachute. Fantastic, isn't it? Anyway, back to downloading our entire minds. So Mr. Kurzweil believes that we will be able to upload our entire brains to computers within the next 32 years, an event known as singularity. Well, this is, the transhumanist agenda. But this is also part of sort of history repeating itself. I mean, how many people here believe, fundamentally have an attachment to the biblical version of creation? As in Genesis? No? Okay. How many people have an attachment to the Darwinian version of creation? God, you're all a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Well, of course, those are the only two versions of man's origins that you're allowed to have an attachment to without being labelled as potentially certifiable. But, the reality is, and obviously you know this, but the reality is that there is an incredible amount of evidence to demonstrate and to effectively prove, as far as I'm concerned, that humanity is a construct. We are a creation from a laboratory. And we're probably not that old. Well, not this iteration anyway. This iteration of humanity may actually only be, 10, 15,000 years old. Because the evidence is in particularly the Sumerian and Akkadian tablets, show that basically there were hominoids on this planet. So this still doesn't answer the whole creation issue. But there were hominoids on this planet that were effectively then used in a genetic engineering experiment, and we know that we're not the first version, we are at least version 4, if not Mark 5, to be used as slave labour. To be used as slave labour on behalf of the Annunaki to perform the mining operations for the gold. And the amount of evidence of that is overwhelming, which is why that information, of course, is suppressed. And it's also why the Zionist establishment were determined to get to Baghdad and loot the museum before Saddam Hussein, who believed he was the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, and he actually believed that one of his missions was to re-establish Babylon to its former greatness, but he was employing every archaeologist around the planet who had the capability and capacity to read the Sumerian Akkadian texts. And as more and more of this information was coming out, it was becoming more and more difficult for the establishment to hold on to their two constructs of creationism or Darwinism. So you can believe A, you can believe B, anything else, no. We certainly don't want you to know the truth. And they know that more and more people are becoming aware of this, which is why they're desperate to, one, destroy the information. Of course, they've been doing this for, 1,500 years? Because it started with the destruction of the Library of Alexandria in 415 AD, the murder of Hypatia. Has anybody ever seen the one and only known relief of Hypatia? Hypatia was like the head of the community in Alexandria. She was absolutely beautiful. She was regarded as, a wonderful woman, absolutely brilliant. She took over the role from her father and nurtured the people in the community, to enable them to achieve whatever it was they were capable of achieving. And of course, she was murdered by the Cyrillian monks in 415 because she was seen as a threat to the New World Order, i.e. the Roman Empire. Well, just Google sometime Hypatia relief or Hypatia portrait, and you'll see the relief. And then look at a picture of Princess Di. Because the first time I stumbled across it, I had to do a double take. Because it's a spitting image of Princess Di. And of course, Princess Di was murdered by the New World Order because she was perceived as a threat to their agenda. Just a remarkable coincidence. Anyway, then we have Time magazine. The year 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Well, I'll be 89 in 2045, so I probably won't know too much about what's going on by then. But this is Kurzweil's idea that basically this is like straight out of the Matrix, isn't it? It's the plug into the spinal column here, accessing what they think is everything that's in the mind. But what are they trying to access? What are they really trying to access? Because the one thing that strikes me is these ruling parasites, they are only capable of accessing one half of their brain, the left half of their brain. And that's what, as I'm going to show you, actually scares the crap out of them, because they realize that more and more people, despite their phenomenal efforts, are actually accessing more and more of the right brain. But let's bring it back a second to what's going on right now in the world, because I do want to discuss this issue, because this is something that's very important to all of Europe. Just a couple of weeks ago, of course, we had this event in the UK. Oh, by the way, you were aware of the story of David Cameron and yeah, well, this is David Cameron engaging in foreplay. If you're not familiar with the story, you can just search for David Cameron and a pig. Now, this is one of our mainstream columnists, and I must confess I don't agree with very much this guy has to offer. But he was right here. He says, this isn't a just war. It's recreational bombing by our Churchill wannabe. Now, a little over 2.5 years ago, no, just under 2.5 years ago, in August of 2013, there was another vote in the British Parliament, and this time David Cameron wanted to bomb Assad on the pretext that Assad had unleashed chemical weapons on the civilian population, which was totally fabricated. I mean, what we now know is that chemical weapons had in fact been unleashed on the civilian population, but those chemical weapons had been unleashed by the terrorists, by the ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, whatever you want to call them, whatever the latest boogie name is, because those weapons had been supplied by Saudi Arabia, but the weapons had been sent across without any instructions. So somebody was obviously messing with them, and unfortunately the sarin gas was released. And obviously it was a terrible event. But it wasn't the responsibility of Assad. And David Cameron was trying to get Parliament, he recalled Parliament to get a parliamentary sanction to unleash an aerial attack on Assad. Well, on the morning, at about 6 o'clock in the morning of that debate and subsequent vote, I got a call from a particular individual who works within the establishment, but he's actually very much on our team. And he called me at 6 o'clock and he said, Ian, I know this is a bit of a tall order, but is there any possibility that you could record a short video presentation outlining the error in trying to launch an attack on Assad and the injustice of it? And I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So I record it. By the time I'd finished with the editing, I got it uploaded, I think at about 1:30 or so. The parliamentary debate started at 1 o'clock. This guy took that video and he emailed it to every single member of Parliament and their constituency offices and their PR people. He tweeted it to everybody, he put it on Facebook. It had 11,000 views within 12 hours. It's only got 13,000 views, I think, or so now, but it's not relevant anymore. It was only relevant on that day. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that that video swayed the day, but if any of those MPs were sitting on the fence and were still undecided about which way they were going to vote, hopefully that video would have swung it. And, of course, David Cameron lost the vote. And Obama then wasn't able to go to the Senate. Thank you. Obama wasn't able to go to the Senate and get a mandate from the Senate because he was hoping to get the Westminster sanction and then use that to persuade the Senate to support an attack on Assad. So roll the clock forward to 2 weeks ago, and there's the vote that evening, and it's the same format. The debate was going to start at 1 o'clock, and the vote was going to be at 10:30 that evening. So was I surprised when I logged into Facebook on the morning of the vote and found that my Facebook account had been blocked for 2 weeks? So, of course, I mean, my immediate reaction is, oh, shit. But then I thought, well, thanks, guys. Thanks for actually letting me know that 2.25 years ago, you actually think that what I put out had some impact. But of course, the other thing that they had the opportunity to do in that 2.5 years is dig the dirt on all the MPs who didn't vote the way the government wanted them to vote 2.25 years ago. You know, and whether that's photographs or whether it's just bribes to support them in their pet projects. But of course, the vote went in favour. But you know, the point that we're trying to make around the UK is that those people who voted or supported their MPs in their vote for an attack on Syria supported their MPs to effectively commit a war crime. And it is a war crime. You know, and I hope that David Cameron and of course Tony Blair, I hope at some time they are guests here in Holland at The Hague. Because that's where they need to answer for these crimes against humanity. You know, when, and I think it was Willem, maybe Ole, who put up the slide which showed Obama making the statement about this is a war on humanity. He was telling us what it is. It is a war on humanity. And it's absolutely the case, as Ole points out. You know, they tell us. It is their belief system that they have to tell us what it is that they're going to do. And then when we do nothing, when we acquiesce and sit back and go, oh, that's terrible, but we do nothing, then that's effectively, in their belief system, a mandate for them to go do it. Now, let me take it to the next level. Consider the possibility, and I know this may seem outrageous, but consider the possibility that there is a universal law that says a species from one planet cannot take over, cannot destroy another planet with an indigenous population unless the indigenous population of that planet participate in their own destruction. Because that's what's happening. That's what's happening right now. Now, I think I showed this slide the last time that I was here. But this is really important. This is absolutely catalytic in terms of illustrating what is occurring right now at a phenomenal rate of knots. This is actually a graphic, and I believe it actually appeared in Dutch as well. It certainly appeared in French and in, obviously, English. And it appeared at the time when each of these countries had an opportunity to have a referendum on their continued membership of the European Union. So, obviously in France and in Holland, if my memory serves me correctly, in both cases the vote was to leave the European Union. And in both cases the government said, well, thanks very much for letting us know what you think. Okay, well that's pretty much, that's it. So, you know, this is the attitude. You know, thanks very much for telling us what you think, but we don't really care. We just wanted to give you the impression that you had some kind of opportunity to say what you think, but we're going to do it anyway. Because they knew damn well that people would go, oh, okay, all right. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to say what we think, but that's okay. And just carry on, just as these guys carry on. Well, this last appeared in Ireland a few years ago in the third attempt, because under the Irish Constitution, it would have been illegal for the Irish government to hand power over to a foreign entity without the full backing of the population. So, of course, they had a referendum in 2008, I think it was, 7 or 8, and that went against. But, of course, the attitude of the European Union is, oh, shit, wrong answer. What do we do? Oh, yeah, we'll hold another referendum. And this one was totally fixed. You know, totally fixed. I mean, you know, there was ballot boxes appearing out of nowhere. Ballot papers voting against membership were being destroyed. But this poster appeared on bus shelters and hoardings around Ireland in the run-up to that vote. Just take a look at the symbolism of this. First of all, we got the stars, and of course people think, oh, that's the stars of the European Union. Look at the geometry. Look at the geometry of these stars. This is Baphomet. It's no accident, it's no coincidence that George Bush was reading My Pet Goat on the morning of 9/11. My Pet Goat, Baphomet. You know, they tell us it's out there in plain sight what their belief system is. And of course, by the way, this is the same geometry as the Uncle Sam posters. You know, remember the posters from the First World War? Your country needs you. Right? Well, that, you know, the hat covered the top here, but this was the beard. Yeah? This was the whiskers. It's the same geometry. Uncle Sam, Baphomet. Okay, what do we have here? Yeah, Tower of Babel. But why do we recognize that as the Tower of Babel, by the way? From the painting, absolutely. Again, I mean, it's a very simplistic illustration, but it's an illustration of how easily we are conditioned. You know, one painting, and from that painting, we then have an impression of what the Tower of Babylon looked like. I mean, it was Bruegel's vision, but, you know, you'd be amazed. I've asked that question at events in the past, and people say, well, we had the blueprints, didn't we? We had the drawings. No, we didn't. But this is Strasbourg. This is the parliamentary building in Strasbourg. So, you know, once again, it's in our face. The European Union is a Babylonian entity. The Vatican is a Babylonian entity. There is nothing Christian about the Vatican. Don't get me wrong. There are many, many good Christians within the Catholic Church, but there is nothing Christian about the Vatican. And it's going to be very interesting to see what unfolds with the Vatican because, of course, as per the predictions of St. Malachi, the 12th century Irish monk, the current pope is the last pope. And he was pretty much spot on with his predictions, although he didn't know it at the time. But he's been pretty much spot on with his predictions of the previous pope. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. So the Babylonian entity. So let's go back to this artwork here. So we have the Tower of Babel. Now what this represents is exactly the same as the separated capstone on the Great Seal. You know, the separated capstone on the back of the $1 bill. And the separation here is the moat. So what we have here within the tower is the domain of the few. Those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. Are they of this world? Well, that's the $64 million question. They actually believe themselves to be, at the very least, to be the direct descendants of those who from heaven to earth came. If only as the half-breeds, the Nephilim, i.e. the offspring between the gods, small g, the Annunaki, and the human women as created by Enki and Ninhursag, the genetic engineer of the Anunnaki. So they're in here. So we have the moat. Then we have these guys in the grey suits, wearing ties. Do you know what this represents? This represents the people whose names you know in the public domain. The people inside here are not in the public domain. They don't need to be. But they have these guys doing their bidding. And these guys in this artwork, they're standing there looking across longingly going, well, what have we got to do to get in? What have we got to do? You know, we've done everything they've asked. You know, we've bombed the crap out of the population of Syria or elsewhere. What have we got to do? The reality is they're never going to get in. Ever. You know, there's no English word, no polite English word, that describes these individuals. I mean, actually, one of the reasons that I might have got banned from Facebook was because I had referred to them as political prostitutes. I think Facebook was concerned that I had undermined the term prostitute. which is an honourable profession, which this isn't. The only language that it has a word to describe these individuals that I can come up with is German, and that's Capo. Capo, and of course that's short for Kampfpolizei, which was the term used by the Nazis in the Jewish ghettos, and it was the term they used for effectively the council, the people they appointed to manage the ghetto. And of course the capos, the Kampfpolizei, were responsible for keeping the ghetto in order, for food distribution, and of course for coming up with the lists of the people to be shipped out to the camps. But what happened when the last resident of the ghetto was shipped out? They were on the last bus. They were on the bus that said evacuation. But they ended up in exactly the same place. So these guys will do whatever it takes. They've sold their soul. They've sold their soul, and they've sold their humanity, and they've sold out humanity. So then we have humanity represented here. The hoi polloi, the masses, the proletariat, Joe Public, whatever term you want to use. But let's take a closer look at that area, because this is not in great focus. Can you just put the lights down just for a second? There we go. So maybe you can see it a little clearer. Can you see how all these people are depicted? Blockheads, yeah, robots, blockheads. Except one. The baby. The baby, yes. So what this graphic is spelling out for us is that those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom know very well that every human enters this physical realm with the potential to access the full range of their capabilities and capacities. And that's what scares the crap out of the ruling parasites. And that's why their determination is to use their prostitutes to run an agenda that makes sure that by the time the human gets into young adulthood, they are a blockhead. And that they are totally conditioned to fulfill whatever role the corporatocracy demands of them. Put the lights back up now, thanks. So, who is this in the tower? Well, probably the best stab at it, no pun intended, was this guy, Dr. John Coleman. Anybody read this book? Great book. Okay, and because it's becoming increasingly in demand, unfortunately the prices are going up, so best to try and find it as a PDF somewhere online. Now, Dr. John Coleman wrote his first edition in the early 1980s, and the first publication of this was 1986, which is before the days of the internet. So it was pure research. He had to do it longhand. Now, I first read this book, I guess, in probably about 2000, 2001 maybe. I think before 9/11 I actually read this, so just before though. And I mean, there was some stuff in there that I thought, well, that's a bit of a stretch. And actually, there was evidence that I was also aware of that suggested he wasn't quite right on some of his assumptions. But he republished it in 2006, and this is an outstanding edition, because now, of course, he did have the access to the internet, but he still, was a longhand researcher. So if you can get hold of a 2006 edition, that, in my opinion, is the more important edition. If you're really interested in seeing what his perception was 20 years earlier, in 86, then obviously you get hold of one of the other editions. But he makes the observation, the story of the Committee of 300. And of course, the 300 relates to the watchers that were sentenced to remain here. So, the Annunaki created humanity by mixing the genes of their own race and the genes of the hominoids that were here on Earth at that time. Now we know from the texts that they didn't quite get it right first time. We also know that there was a lot of awful experimentation. And we know that, say, we are at least the fourth, if not the fifth iteration. And the humans were used as slaves and the females were used as hostesses. And there was a group amongst the Annunaki known as the Igigi. It's I-G-I-G-I, Igigi. That's the spelling we use anyway. And the Igigi were the pilots who were responsible for shipping the gold that was being mined here on Earth to the way stations on the Moon and on Mars. And the gold was being mined for the purpose of geoengineering. Geoengineering, because they had a problem with their planet, Nibiru. They had a problem with their planet. It was losing heat. It has allegedly a phenomenal orbit that takes 3,657 years to go around the sun. And when it was in the far reaches of the solar system, it was losing the heat. And they came up with the idea of mining gold to put into their atmosphere to keep the heat in. And some scholars believe that they were potentially here for something like 400,000 years doing this. And yet we can only trace our history back about 6,500 years, max. Anything beyond 6,500 is pure guesswork. The 300, though, the Igigi, were, as it says in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, they found the women to be attractive. And basically, I can't remember the biblical, oh yes, the biblical term is, and they came in unto them. They came in unto them. That's biblical speak for shagged them. And it says in Genesis chapter 4, verse 6, I think it is, it's the Elohim, which is plural for gods and goddesses. In this case, probably gods, male. But anyway, they picked up on the human women and were having sex with the human women, which was against the Anunnaki law. And their punishment was to be sentenced here on Earth for a time unknown. Well, I don't have the time this evening to explain why, but I do have a DVD outside that does. They believed that 2012 was possibly the year that they were going to be taken off, because it also talks about all their descendants being taken off. And if you actually want to get a apocryphal insight to what I'm sharing with you, then download the book of Enoch, which of course didn't make it into the canonical Bible. It's an apocryphal work, but the book of Enoch actually will help shed some light in what I'm sharing with you here. So these people who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers were fearful that they were going to be taken off in 2012. And I recorded a presentation in 2008. And I said, if they get beyond 2012, then they're just going to go for broke. Because they're going to feel that they got through that particular marker, and they're going to feel or believe that they've effectively been given a free hand to then establish their total dominion. A bit like Saddam Hussein when he met with April Glaspie in the third week of July of 1990, where Saddam believed that April Glaspie, as the US ambassador, had effectively given him the green light to invade Kuwait. Of course, he found out that actually he was mistaken. I'd like to think these guys are mistaken too, but we shouldn't rely on it. Right now, it's game on. So who are these 300? Well, there have been many attempts to establish their networks. We might not know who they are on an individual basis, but what John Coleman asserted was that even within the Committee of 300, there's an inner sanctum of 13 who call themselves or refer to themselves as the Olympians. Yeah, well, hey, Hollywood is just telling us what's really going on. It's helping share, it's putting it out there You know, it's up to us then to interpret it. So within the Committee of 300, you've got the Olympians. And Dr. John Coleman takes a stab at who the bloodlines of the Olympians might be. And of course, he comes up with all the usual suspects like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, the Schieffs, the DuPonts, etc. But what he also makes the observation is we don't necessarily know for sure who within that bloodline necessarily holds the patriarchy or the matriarchy. Because of course we've also got the Saxe-Coburg-Goethers in there, you know, the European royalty. So this is just one of the stabs, and you can find a lot of these sort of charts on the web, and they're pretty good stabs at the control network that's established. But of course the reality is that these control networks are set up by the prostitutes. They're set up by humans doing their bidding in return for the rewards, the lifestyle, the titles, the money. So this is where we have to change the terminology. The elite network. No, it's not. It's the parasitic network. A total parasitic network. So who are the real elite? These guys, the ruling parasites, who are the elite? The ruling parasites have, and their prostitutes, have access to all the toys. They have access to monetary control. They have access to all the weaponry. So you would think that their task should be relatively easy. But actually, it's getting more and more difficult to control large numbers of people. So they've got to create their false flags or other type of events. And I just want to share a couple of things with you, because the British arms industry is pumping phenomenal amounts of money into the conflict in the Middle East. Phenomenal amount. With the biggest chunk going to Saudi Arabia. Now, when I've done my straw polls in the UK, I don't come across too many people who are in favour of an agenda that will cause loss of life. And yet the Murdoch, Zionist-controlled media, runs headlines like this. Is this human? Blitz them to hell. Cameron is urged to set date for airstrikes. Smashing terror state, best way. I mean, it's creating that mindset. And what they're hoping is that the population is sufficiently dumbed down to just go, oh yeah, that's exactly what we should do. I mean, here's another one. Pull the trigger. Pull the trigger. Yeah, they are socio-psychopaths, absolutely incapable of the fundamentals of humanity. But they are losing it. They are losing it because more and more people are starting to see through it. And this is, believe it or not, from the mainstream media earlier this year. Terror trial collapses after fears of deep embarrassment to security services. This is a Swedish national who argued that British intelligence agencies were supporting the same Syrian opposition groups as he was. And of course he was being accused of providing armaments to ISIS. And the case was dropped. You know, the prosecution of a Swedish national accused of terrorist activities in Syria has collapsed at the Old Bailey after it became clear Britain's security and intelligence agencies would have been deeply embarrassed had a trial gone ahead. His lawyers argued that British intelligence agencies were supporting the same Syrian opposition groups as he was and were party to a secret operation providing weapons and non-lethal help to the groups, including the Free Syrian Army. So what is going on here? What is going on here? How is it that ISIS doesn't attack Israel? Right? And how is it that they don't support the Palestinians? Well, could it be that Israel is actually behind the ISIS groups? Of course they are. The evidence is almost irrefutable. It's the UK, the US, and an Israeli construct. You know, this was when they were challenged. Israel on Saturday came to the rescue of 7 Syrian nationals found wounded along the border fence. When did you ever know the Israelis to treat an injured Palestinian? Exactly. You know, this is from the Times of Israel. Critically injured Syrian transferred to Israeli hospital because he was more than likely a Mossad operative. ISIS, Israeli Secret Intelligence Services. Once again, it's in your face. Yeah, the article goes on. Israel routinely takes in and treats Syrians injured in the civil war. Yeah, well, of course, they're on the same side. What's ISIS doing? ISIS wants to create an Islamic State. No, it doesn't. ISIS is there to create greater Israel. ISIS is there to ethnically cleanse the area, to provide the opportunity for the Zionist dream of greater Israel, everything between the Nile and the Euphrates. And a big part of this, of course, is Syria. And getting control of Syria also means that Israel then can exploit the oil resources in the Golan Heights, which Rupert Murdoch has a significant interest in. David Cameron, a few years ago, said, "I am a Zionist. If what you mean by a Zionist is someone who believes that the Jews have a right to a homeland in Israel and a right to their country, then yes, I am a Zionist, and I'm proud of the fact that conservative politicians down the ages have played a huge role in helping to bring this about." It's the Zionist agenda. But this is dovetailing into another agenda. An agenda that is nearly 100 years old, to destroy national homogeneity in Europe. And here's the evidence. This is Peter Sutherland, who's a real nasty piece of work. He's not part of the inner sanctum. He's one of the whores. He's the founding Director General of the World Trade Organization. He's former chairman of BP. He's still chairman of Goldman Sachs International. I mean, this guy has a whole list of qualifications. But this is an interview that he gave to the BBC on June the 21st, 2012. And in that interview, he said the EU should do its best to undermine the homogeneity of its member states. Peter Sutherland told peers the future prosperity of many EU states depended on them becoming multicultural. He goes on to say, we will nurse a sense of our homogeneity and differences from others, and that's precisely what the European Union, in my view, should be doing its best to undermine. Now, Peter Mandelson, who is Prince of Darkness, he's known as the Prince of Darkness in the UK. Of course, he's also the former Commissioner for Trade in the European Union. But he, in an interview, said, immigrants, we sent out search parties to get them to come and made it hard for Brits to get work. And what we're seeing in the UK is the creation of an underclass. People who, if they can get work, it's on minimum wage or 0 hours contracts. So what we have is literally, this is below poverty line. It's people who are reliant on food banks. And let me tell you, in the north of England, I've seen poverty that I haven't seen outside of places like Pakistan and India. They're not quite shanty towns, but, don't be fooled by the facade of the house, because when you get inside, it's disgusting. So how are we going to destroy this national homogeneity? How are we going to create this multiculturalism? Because the agenda's going too slowly. We need to break down this attachment to nation states. This is their view, by the way, not mine. We need to break down the attachment to the nation states. We need to break down all attachment to culture. So we've got to play on the emotions, which coincidentally is the colours of the French flag. Anyway, that's just an aside. This picture, as far as the UK is concerned, unleashed a wave of emotion that literally caused almost instantaneous polarisation within British society. Because you had the traditional left basically saying, oh, that's terrible. Let's just let them all in. Let's let them all in. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that there isn't a responsibility here, because the UK has certainly been a major party and contributor to the hell that has been unleashed in the Middle East. and North Africa over the last 60 years. But at the same time, we've got a problem because we've got indigenous people who can't find work, who are on minimum wage, and the corporations are rubbing their hands together in glee because they know that there's now going to be even more people prepared to do even more work for minimum wage on 0 hours contracts with no liability for employment law. But don't think that this is anything new, because this agenda to break down the homogeneity of Europe was established in the 1920s by a guy called Count von Kalergi. Anybody heard of him? Kalergi. Okay, let me read you this. He wrote a book in 1925 which basically outlined, a couple of books, but he basically outlined his philosophy thus. The man of the future, and he's talking about the European, the man of the future will be mixed race. The Eurasian Negroid race of the future will replace the diversity of peoples. Russian Bolshevism constitutes a decisive step towards this purpose, where a small group of communist spiritual aristocrats, I'm going to listen to that term carefully, communist spiritual aristocrats govern the country. The general staff of both are recruited from Europe's spiritual leader race, the Jews. From the European quality people, he's talking about the aristocracy, the mass, two quality races rise up, blood aristocracy and Jewry. Both believe in their higher mission of their better blood. The superiority of their spirit predestines them to become a main factor of the future nobility. And there is a Coldenherve Calgary Award today, but in 1950, Coldenherve Calgary was awarded the very first Charlemagne Prize. Subsequent winners have included Winston Churchill, Edward Heath, Bill Clinton, Henry Kissinger, and Tony Blair. Of mixed race himself, Coldenherve Calgary was married 3 times. 2 of his wives were Jewish. In 1924, he founded the journal Pan Europa, of which he was editor and principal author. The following year, he started publishing his main work, The Kampf of Pan-Europe, The Fight for Pan-Europa. In 1926, first Congress of the Pan-European Union was held in Vienna, and the 2,000 delegates elected Coldenherve Calgary as president of the Central Council, a position he held until his death. At the beginning of 1924, Baron Louis de Rothschild introduced Coldenherve Calgary to Max Warburg. The Warburgs and the Schieffs, you will recall, were the prime financiers to each side in the First World War. Max Warburg, who offered to finance his pan-European movement for the next 3 years, giving him 60,000 gold marks. Warburg eventually remained supportive of the movement for his entire life and served as an intermediate man to bring him in contact with influential personalities such as Paul Warburg and Bernard Baruch. Now, if you haven't come across Bernard Baruch, I encourage you to search this guy. This guy is at the centre of everything, from the establishment of the Federal Reserve in 1913 to, in fact, he was involved in the sinking of the Titanic. Well, the other ship, but, you know. He was the architect of the Great Depression in the late 1929 to 1933. How do we know this? Because he told his good friend Winston Churchill what was about to happen and advised Winston Churchill what to do with his investments. He was the architect of Pearl Harbor. I mean, he was the mentor of both Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. It all starts to fall into place, yeah? Yeah. So you can see that what's going on here is a very, very deep agenda. But the real elite, 6 o'clock already. The real elite is everyone who knows what's going on. And that's why they are investing phenomenal amounts of money on programs like vaccines, GMO, Fluoridation of the water, soon to be lithium in the water as well, a key ingredient of antidepressants, of SSRIs. And so it goes on. They are doing everything they possibly can to ensure that by the time a human reaches young adulthood, that they are a blockhead, that they are a slave to the system. Now, when I hear people say we are the 99%, I almost want to vomit. The reality is that 96% of humanity, unfortunately, doesn't give a damn. And if they do give a damn, unfortunately, they're in a situation where they've got to spend pretty much every working hour trying to keep food on the table and a roof over the heads of their family. So even though they may be aware of what's going on, they have to prioritize. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, they prioritize in terms of the family. But everybody has an opportunity to create some time, however much it might just be an hour a week, or it might be a few hours a week. But collectively, even though it may only be 3 or 4% of the population, there's still way more of us than there is of them. And we have the capacity to access that part of our brain that they don't. We have the capacity to access our right brain. And they are desperate, absolutely desperate, to keep us locked in to this mode, the left brain. They don't want us to realize that there's a different type of life out there. They want to keep people locked in. You can always tell the people that are immersed, literally, deep in the left brain, because they're the ones, if you look at their diary, their agenda, then they've got something for every 15 minutes a day. Yeah? Those people who spend more time over here don't have a diary. You just go with it, see what happens. Because you know that there's a great script, and all you're going to do is enjoy the ride. Oh, I think somebody else already said that. That was Bill, what's his name, wasn't it? Yeah, Bill Hicks. But enjoy the ride. And they are desperate to prevent us from getting on that ride, from crossing the corpus callosum. And this is what the vaccine agenda is all about. It's what you've heard today from Desiree and from Ole and from Willem. Their desperation to keep everybody in total lockdown. Like I said, they don't care why you don't participate. They just want you out of the way, out of the game. But we've got, here we go. Evolution, if we're not careful. This is what they want to try and do, get us into that mindset. But we do have a way. And, what they have done, they have set up things like NGOs. They've set up organizations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and, all these other NGOs, Ovars, 38 Degrees. All of these opposition groups to fight the cause for humanity. No. It's to suck you into a black hole. Remember, they don't care why you don't get involved as long as you don't get involved. And things like these petitions, when people go, oh yeah, I've done my bit, I signed my petition. In the UK, we have a charade that goes on every single day at Downing Street, the home of the Prime Minister. Every 15 minutes, somebody has booked a time to go into Downing Street and hand in their petition or their letter to the Prime Minister. Every 15 minutes. You stand at the gate watching it. It's like, God damn it. How can people be so dumb? But they go in there and they go up to the door, knock on the door. And a guy in a very crisp white shirt and a tie comes to the door and says, oh, thank you very much. I'll make sure Mr. Cameron sees that immediately. And of course, as soon as the door shuts, it's like, in the bin. And you know what? I know people that have been to Downing Street literally tens of times and say, so what response did you get? And they say, well, actually, I got the same 6-line response every single time. And I said, Joe, do you know what the definition of the insanity? It's following the same behavioural pattern over and over again and expecting a different result. So how many times are you going to go to number 10 Downing Street, hand in your petition, which has taken you hours to put together, and then go and hand it in so that it can be binned, so that you can get a 6-line response, and the government can say, yes, democracy at work. Yeah, pay your money to Greenpeace, pay your money to Friends of the Earth. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, in some cases they do some good work. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, you might as well just pour your money down a black hole. But there's a way, there is another way. And this is what Willem alluded to earlier. Because the anti-fracking community in the UK, and don't get me wrong, I'm not taking any credit for what's occurring with the anti-fracking community in the UK, because it's a community. And it's a community movement that we've never seen the likes of before in the UK. So we had a well fracked in 2011, which led to seismic events, which led to a number of properties being damaged. By the way, the damage that it caused was nothing compared to what's going on in Groningen. But that's not unconventional gas, that's conventional gas. Unconventional gas is certainly a different ballgame. So we had one well fracked that led to two seismic events, which led to a moratorium being placed on fracking, on the unconventional gas exploitation in the UK. That moratorium was lifted in December 2012, so exactly 3 years ago. For the last 3 years, we have been frack-free in the UK as a combination of the anti-fracking community and, of course, the falling oil price. And we're very grateful to OPEC for dumping the price of oil. But what is confounding the establishment and the industry is that we have over 400 groups. And let me tell you, by April, that'll be 1,000. Because earlier this week, the British government announced 159 new areas in the country. That's 100 square kilometre blocks. And they announced 159 new areas to be open to fracking immediately. Well, I mean, they have to go through the process, but what this means, this has been a great recruiting week for the anti-fracking community. But when I'm out talking to communities about fracking, funnily enough, I don't mention any of the stuff that we've been talking about this evening. I focus on fracking, because the vast majority of people in the audience are part of the 96% plus that are never really going to have too much interest in a lot of the stuff that we've been discussing today. But my detractors try to undermine what I do with communities. So they say, oh, you've got Ian Crane coming to your community. He's just a rampant conspiracy theorist. So what happens is some people may not come along to a presentation because they're taken in by that, but others say, well, I want to go hear what this guy has to say. And they're actually disappointed when I'm only talking about fracking. And of course, in the Q&A, I might get some of the industry guys will come along as well and ask questions in an attempt to draw me on the bigger or broader issues. And I always make the observation, I say, look, I'm here to discuss fracking. That's the only issue on the table tonight. We're going to talk about fracking. And what has happened is over that 3 years, I don't know what the percentage is, but a number of people who have come into this level of activism for the first time in their lives, they're getting involved because they're suddenly realizing that there's a government that wants to actually introduce a technology that is unproven. In fact, the only thing that's proven about it is that it contaminates your water, your soil, and your air. So that's what gets them involved, because they're pretty annoyed. And then they start to look at some of the other stuff. So it's become a portal. So in many, many ways, the unconventional gas agenda in the UK has been a gift. Yeah. I know, 5 minutes. I'll wrap in 5 minutes. That's an Ole 5 minutes. But look, the key element of the anti-fracking community is recognizing that we don't have to agree on everything. Social media has deliberately created a situation which creates division. And it's creating a mindset where unless you agree with everything that I agree with, then you must be a government shill. And of course this is brilliant, because it creates the division. So, and we have a few of those people who we have to unfortunately deal with. But, you know, the wider element, people can see the sense in this. And the beauty of our 450 plus community groups is that, you know, some of the groups are just local citizens. Some people don't even want to be part of a group for obvious reasons, and they just want to work as individuals, which is what I do. And then I just, you know, work with the groups that invite me to work with them. Then we have businesses that understand the potential impact on their business if this industry kicks off. And most of it negative. Obviously, there's a few that see it as positive. Then we have a few concerned academics. And interestingly, we're getting more and more academics now starting to speak out about it. So you can see this is it's an organic community that has no structure, no leadership. And this is a key element, because the establishment really wants us to establish a national anti-fracking organisation. So they can claim, well, we talked to the committee of the national organisation and we've consulted with them and they're happy with what we're doing. Never give them the opportunity to do that. You do it on a community by community basis. And the emphasis here is nurturing and encouraging communities to become empowered. To get them to recognise that if they come together, they are enormously powerful. Because the establishment doesn't actually know how to deal with a community that will do whatever it takes to stop something from happening. And they'll do everything they can through the normal channels, but if push comes to shove, they will actually lay down in front of the trucks. And we're finding that a massive part of this community are retirees. Because these are the people that have financial independence and they have the time. And for some of them, it's given them a new lease of life. We have a group in East Yorkshire. In fact, I'm due in court on Wednesday because one of the companies is trying to force me into bankruptcy. Good luck with that. Can't get blood out of a stone, can you? Because I had the audacity to challenge them in the courts when they were trying to evict one of the camps. So they evicted the camp, and we moved the camp to the side of the road. And then the government found a loophole in one of the road safety laws that gave them the opportunity to remove the camp without going through the courts. And all of a sudden, local community realised they hadn't got any protectors. They hadn't got the protection community there. So they realised that unless they actually stepped up to the plate, then these motherfrackers, as I call them, these motherfrackers were going to roll into town. So this community, primarily retirees, decided that they were going to stop this industry and let it be known that they were prepared to stop this industry. So they call themselves the Jerry Activists. And there's one old lady, I shouldn't say that, because she's very young now. She's got a new lease of life. She's 82. And they were standing up in front of the trucks a few weeks ago, and this lady said, "Will I get arrested today? Will I get arrested today?" And we're like, "Whoa, slow down, slow down. You don't have to get arrested. You know, just being here." Because the industry and the police know that to arrest an 82-year-old local resident is like a PR nightmare. But you know, all these people, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, but these people who were entering into their twilight years and just, you know, mulling the days away before they crossed back over, all of a sudden they got a new lease of life. And the establishment and the police have no idea how to handle them. You know, there's one lady who appears in, I've got a documentary outside called Voices from the Gas Fields, and a lady called Anne Power. And I mean, she is absolutely fearless. She's there with her stick, waving her stick, and they threaten to arrest her. It's great, but it's pulling together people from right across the political spectrum. It's pulling people together from right across the philosophical, the religious spectrum. It's giving people an opportunity to recognise that when we focus on what we agree on, we are enormously powerful. And guess what? We're also enormously creative. We have far more creativity than anything the establishment can throw at us. So this is just a portal. But my point really here is that whatever the portal, we've actually got to start getting involved. Because it's one thing to be, you know, writing about stuff, talking about stuff, but unless we're actually out there, leading from the front or supporting from the front line. That's why I'm in court. They didn't like my castle. Oh, this is out. They really didn't like my castle. This, by the way, is the 82-year-old lady I told you about. This is Anne Power. But the effect of this, the effect of that particular castle was that on August the 12th of this year, so 1 year after the castle was forcibly removed by the High Court bailiffs, and 6 months after the camp was removed by the local council under the road traffic legislation, Rathlin Energy announced that they were not going to drill at Crawberry Hill. And they are, right now they are in the process, as I speak, they're in the process of returning that pad to its former agricultural glory. And that's a combination of the castle, the camp, and then the local community stepping up to the plate. And what we're trying to do now with our 450 plus groups is encourage those communities to understand the full capacity that they have. And what I know is that will just be a portal, and they will start to then explore other things. They will start to look at things, whether it's the vaccines, the geoengineering, the GMO foods, the fractional reserve banking system, whatever it is, however people come at it, but we're getting there and we are accelerating. So although it may look like, we're really behind the 8 ball, every time these guys up their game, or they think they up their game, we have an opportunity to point out the anomalies to people. I mean, the classics of Ole's presentation today, the recent events. After 9/11, there was 24 people around the world looking at it. Today, there's literally tens or hundreds of thousands of people who are all over it once an event unfolds. So I believe in humanity. I believe that we will prevail. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't waste my time and I'd be playing golf. But I really do believe that we can break. It's going to be a tough ride. But if we give it everything that we've got and we really make an effort, even if it's just a few hours a week, we make an effort to get involved in some way, shape or form on an issue that we feel passionate about, collectively, we're going to see a tremendous change from the trajectory that we appear to be going on right now. So, sorry, Willem. Thanks very much. Thanks, mate. And by the way, I do have a few DVDs outside, looking at transhumanism, looking at the belief systems of the ruling parasites. And it's just one price on all of them. Take any 3 DVDs for €20, and I'll throw in a free compilation DVD, a CD of the soundtrack from the anti-fracking camps. Thank you.
Wow, quite a day. I think it was a very successful